Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Tisha Cable, CEO of C Model Data, and today we have a true visionary leader in the intersection of AI, supply chain, and global trade. His name is Ricky. He's currently the co-founder and CEO of SourceReady. Ricky is a proven entrepreneur with a strong track record, including co-founding TreeLab, which was a low-code supply chain platform backed by a bunch of major investors. He'll tell you all about it himself. And that company was successfully acquired in May of 2024. Shout out and congratulations to you. But building on that success, Ricky is now focused on a very ambitious goal, if I must say, of making global trade as easy to use as ChatGPT. And with his new venture, SourceReady, he's building an AI platform to simplify product sourcing and global trade by cutting through all the complexities such as tariffs and regulations and supplier negotiations, really connecting businesses instantly with verified suppliers worldwide. So, Ricky, I'm pumped to have you here. Grateful for the opportunity to talk about this with you. Would you share more about you, your experience, and SourceReady with the audience?
Thank you, Tisha, for the intro, and really happy to be on the show. So my name is Ricky. I'm the founder of SourceReady. This is my second venture, as Tisha mentioned. So I've been working in the supply chain and technology space for over 8 years. My previous company, TreeLab, we mainly worked with enterprise clients to help them better digitize their supply chain and collaborate with their suppliers. So the pain point we identified was that a lot of companies have these ERP systems that they use internally, but all of this external data with suppliers still sits in spreadsheets and email. So we created this platform where it was a lot more collaborative. We allowed companies to onboard their suppliers into our platform to better collaborate in real time. After selling the company last year, I started SourceReady soon after. It's also in the supply chain and procurement space. And the pain point we identified was that for many, especially small businesses, the process of finding a supplier, especially one that's outside of the US, is a very convoluted and complex process. If you think about your average startup brand owner, like a brand owner that starts on Shopify or wants to sell something on Amazon, how do you find the supplier for a product, right?
Mm-hmm.
People typically go to Alibaba, which is the website that a lot of people go to, or they attend trade shows. But the challenge of Alibaba is that, first of all, it's very China-centric. So all the suppliers there mostly are out of China. And as everyone knows, with the tariff situation going on, people don't want to source only out of China. And the second thing is, how do you tell BS from what's real? Because you'll see a lot of suppliers, they're advertising certain products that when you actually talk to them, you realize that that's actually not the manufacturer. They disguise themselves as manufacturers, but in reality, it's like a trading company disguising themselves as a supplier. So how do you actually properly vet a supplier without flying to China and seeing them if they're real, right? So a lot of small business owners have got scammed if they don't have experience doing this for the first time. So our goal with SourceReady is to leverage AI to better help businesses diversify their supply chain, find alternative suppliers, and more importantly, make this entire process of just finding a supplier, vetting a supplier, negotiating with the supplier more seamless and automated. So that's kind of the gist.
Yeah, the gist, and big and audacious as a goal, right? So you're talking about making global trade as easy as ChatGPT. How do you take an industry that's built on relationships that might span decades, these really complex customs regulations, language barriers, and let's be really honest here, a lot of really informal knowledge that might live in someone's head. So what I really want to understand from you is, so you've got businesses who might be used to working with freight forwarders. They might be used to working with customs brokers, sourcing agents, all of these intermediary type of folks. Walk me through a moment when you had to convince someone that an AI could actually handle what they've relied on human expertise for, and how do you navigate that skepticism when people say, sure, but my sourcing agent, he completely understands the nuances that no algorithm could ever.
So I think the way I approach this is, first of all, I don't think AI is perfect. I don't think AI can completely replace the human expertise. However, I think there are many cases where AI is actually better at humans. I'll give an example. You talked about customs brokers and agencies. So even as a customs broker, they are not aware of every country's tariff codes because it's very complicated, right? There's hundreds of thousands of different product categories, and tariff rates are always changing with different policies. So you can think of us as a tool that actually improves the efficiencies. Even if you currently work with a customs broker, the tool can still help you because essentially you can have an additional source of information to cross-reference. And actually, a lot of our clients are these agencies using our tool to improve their service capability. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is the things in which humans are good at, as you mentioned, is nuanced understanding, right? So that human gut and intuition, I think, is something that AI is not going to be able to replace. However, what AI is better at humans at is actually ingesting large volumes of data and taking and finding insights from that. So I'll give an example. If I were to give you 10,000 supplier profiles and I give you a few requirements, I said, okay, Tisha, I want you to find suppliers with this certification. I want them to have a minimum order quantity of less than 50, and I want them to be outside of China, and I also want them to be able to meet my price. Okay, so with those 4 requirements, as a human, no human would have the capacity to look at all 10,000 suppliers and rank each supplier against your criteria. You just don't have the time and the capacity to do that. The human mind cannot fit 10,000 suppliers in your mind. AI, however, can. AI can do that in 30 seconds. It can look at every single supplier profile and basically rank the supplier against your requirements. So I think this is a use case where the things in which humans are not good at, AI can actually complement. And the things in which humans are good at, the AI is not going to make the final decision of who you want to work with. It's your call to make that decision. The AI is just organizing all of this data and saying, hey, I've looked at all 10,000. Here are the top 10 I identified. And then from that top 10, it's going to write you analysis of the pros and cons of each. And it's up to you as a human with judgment to decide which one to work with. And the AI can also flag certain potential risks or inconsistencies, things in which, looking at patterns across large volumes of data is also something AI is much better at than humans. So I would not go to the extreme to say, okay, now with AI, we don't need any agencies. We don't need custom brokers. It's not like that. These agencies are still going to exist.
Yeah.
What's changed, however, is for small businesses, if you think about it, a lot of agencies don't want to work with small businesses because they're too small. If you think about your average startup brand owner that's just starting out, right? They want to order 500 pieces of a t-shirt. If you try to work with like a sourcing agency, they're either going to charge you insane prices to service you, or you're going to have to work through this yourself. So what we believe our tool can help with is especially this early stage phase when you're not certain yet about what to do. The AI tool can act as kind of like a consultant initially to guide you through that initial process. And then once you've scaled big enough and you want someone on the ground and in China to do this vetting, you can still work with the agency. But the tool can still be an enablement. So that's the way we think about it.
I always say enablement and decision support, essentially, right? So I get this information. I take all the repeatable, mundane things that a human being can't do awesomely. So you got this all spelled out. I hope you guys are listening because this was a really good explanation, I think, in terms that people will get. So here's a scenario for you. You've helped a client source from a region. They've built their supply chain around it. Then suddenly there's a tariff change or political tension even. How do you architect Source Ready to help businesses to really navigate that volatility without either over-promising what AI can predict or leaving them exposed to risks that they might not see coming?
That's a very good question. So I think number one, it's about proactive versus reactive. So one thing AI can be very good at is monitoring all the changes that are happening with tariff rates and supply chain risks, right? So that's one thing our AI can help with. And the second thing is actually providing the data and insights to help you diversify. So for example, we have clients to say, hey, I want to find suppliers that can make the same product, but in Vietnam instead of China. Well, the challenge is most of these factories and suppliers don't even have websites. How would you even find factories in Vietnam that can make this particular cup, right? And traditionally, how they would do this is they would either go to trade shows or they would ask for relationship and referrals. They would ask people, be like, hey, do you know a supplier in Vietnam that can make this this t-shirt or this clothing? And through your relationship network, you might be able to find 5 or 10 suppliers. However, there are thousands of suppliers in Vietnam that potentially can make this shirt. So what we've done is we've acquired data directly from government customs agencies. So we have actually import-export data.
Wow.
Using this import-export data, we can map out where other brands are importing their products from. So we can literally tell you where Lululemon or where your favorite brand, who their suppliers are. And that's how we've built this, huge database of suppliers. We have over 2.6 million suppliers in our database. And most of these suppliers, you won't be able to Google them. You won't find them on ChatGPT because they don't have public-facing websites. But the reason why we have their data is because we acquire this data from all these hard-to-get sources like government data, customs data, government registries to basically help you identify these new regions. So I would say, if you look at supplier diversification, every brand and retailer thinks about this problem. They're like, oh, yeah, we're definitely open to finding suppliers outside of China, but where do we start? How do I find a supplier in Mexico or Vietnam or Egypt? And that's the challenge, right? And we're trying to lower the barrier to say, hey, look, it doesn't cost you that much money. We can just give you a list of 1,000 suppliers in Cambodia or Vietnam that can make the same product you're making in China today. So that's one of the things that I think AI and data is really going to help with. And obviously, the second part we help with is automating the most time-consuming part of sourcing, which is negotiation and communication. So let's say you wanted to actually make this shirt, and I gave you 500 suppliers that can make this. Now, the next process would be you would find their email or contact info. You would email each supplier, and you would say, hey, I'm Tisha. I'm a brand based in LA. We're trying to make this T-shirt. Are you able to work with us? Can you give us a price? And imagine doing that 100 times across to all these suppliers, right? This is a very repetitive and time-consuming process. So instead of doing that, what we've done is our AI can basically do this initial pre-screening for you. So instead of you having to email 100 suppliers, our AI will integrate with your email and will reach out to these suppliers on your behalf. The supplier doesn't know this. They think they're talking to you because they see an email coming from you. But in reality, it's actually the AI doing the bulk of the work. And I think this really just lowers the barrier for businesses to find alternative suppliers. Because if you think about big companies, like if you think about a Walmart or if you think about a Costco or Target, they have thousands of procurement team members whose full-time job is to find these new suppliers and to negotiate. But for a small business, you don't have hundreds of people that can do this work for you.
One, right? There's
like
one
person.
person.
Yeah, you're the solo,
right.
You're the solo person.
That's right.
And this is where AI can really help with, where instead of you having to hire a bunch of expensive people or outsourcing this to an agency that will charge you tens of thousands of dollars, now you can have a team of AI agents doing a lot of this work for you. And I think that is where AI is really democratizing this access to high quality suppliers.
I think what I'm really appreciating in this is you're demonstrating yet again, when we talk about these use cases of AI, and this is the most important thing is it's going to do something for you, right? It's not just about producing more information. It's actually going to take a few steps on your behalf to shorten up the cycle of your workflow. And that's when we start talking about AI being very useful for folks, right? Is to take some work off my hands, right? I don't just need more information and data points, which is currently why when people always ask questions like, well, what about, what's different with ChatGPT? Well, that's good at giving you information, right? But when we're talking about executing a workflow, that's a different set. That's something that differentiates.
Correct.
So you yourself have a very fascinating background. So you won a grand award at Intel for this rail-based intracity delivery platform. That's about connecting physical points efficiently. And now you're connecting businesses to suppliers. But I'm really curious about something. Those early engineering projects really taught you about system design. But global trade isn't really just like a technical problem. Like it's a people, a trust, a cultural norms, relationships, dynamics type of thing. So how do you translate technical optimization thinking to a domain where efficient doesn't always mean better, especially if it sacrifices the relationship quality or even local understanding?
I think there's a misconception that AI is only able to do very objective things. Like, I'll give an example. Like, let's say you wanted to find a supplier that can make premium quality products. Now, premium is very subjective. How do you know a supplier can make very high quality or premium? Because there's no like standard metric that you can measure this against. So one thing that we've embedded in our AI is allowing AI to go into this more human aspect of analyzing this more qualitative aspect. And this qualitative aspect is not just gut intuition. There is still data points that the AI will come off of. So for example, because we have customs data, we can look at what are the types of customers this supplier has worked with previously. And then using that data, we can then create a persona of the supplier. So if we know this supplier primarily works with premium brands like Lululemon or Alo Yoga, then it's more likely that the supplier is going to be able to make higher quality products than a supplier that only works with Target or these more budget retailers. So that's one example. And the second part is I don't think AI will ever replace the human intuition and the nuanced gut sense.
Mm-hmm.
But in this industry today, it's very extreme. It's almost completely subjective and completely based on relationships and gut sense and going to trade shows and that. It's underserved where there's actually a lot of things that you can use data and AI to get rid of this initial, at least screening aspect. You need to build relationships, but you have to understand, I don't like to use this example, but I think this is a good example, like Tinder, like or dating apps, right? Like
Yeah.
dating apps is not
Yeah.
going to replace the fact that you have to go on a date and meet the person, meet face to face, and
just-
ultimately decide whether you want to continue, right? But what dating apps do well is out of the hundreds of thousands of people that you could potentially meet, it can match you with potential fits. Now, if you don't have Tinder, you might not even have the opportunity to go on that date because you would never have met this person. I think with supplier sourcing, it's similar. It's like a lot of times if you ask a brand, hey, where did you find that supplier? Most of them, it's serendipitous. It's based on luck. Like, oh, I knew someone that made the introduction to me, so we got in touch. And then you happen to build a relationship. But what if there's a better option that you just never even got a chance to talk to, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like an optimization problem. I think what data and AI is going to be able to do is out of the hundreds of thousands of potential options, it's going to give you the top 10, 15 options based on objective facts. And then out of the 15, it's up to you to decide which one you actually want to go dive deep into. It's kind of like dating, right? It's like if you're in a city, there's millions of candidates that could be your partner. But how do you know which one to actually spend time on going on dates with? And I think this is where technology can really help with. And before, it's based on pure luck. Like if you happen to meet someone at a coffee shop and they happen to be good, then you're lucky. But what if you didn't get that chance to meet someone at that coffee shop? Or what if there's someone better that you never had a chance to meet? I think this is where AI and humans are really going to augment each other, right? AI is going to be good at looking at large volumes of data to help you find the candidates. And then once you have the candidates, you as the human need to make the final call to decide which one you want to build relationships with.
Absolutely. It's the right information at the right time situation, which is what we've been talking about here at C Model as well. Hey, so here's my favorite part. Speaking of personas, we are going to assess your decision-making persona. Okay, so we're going to dig into how you actually decide. So I've got 4 different decision-making styles. And after each one, you're going to tell me on a scale of 0 to 100% how much it resonates with how you might approach a decision. The thing is, across all 4, you only get 100%. Okay, so you have to keep track, a little bit of math. All right, are you ready?
So I have to score?
Yes. So I'll give you a whole persona and I'll give you some questions that persona will ask, and then you'll score out how much that resonates with you.
Okay.
Okay. And 0 to 100%, but you only get 100% across all 4 personas.
I only get 100, so I have to add up to 100?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a fun little exercise that I love. It's fun for me anyway. We'll see if you agree. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Here's the first one. It's called a feeler. It's a values-driven leader. So this persona prioritizes alignment with core values and mission, often weighing the human impact and cultural fit of decisions alongside business metrics. So when deciding on a new feature for the SourceReady AI platform or a supplier verification process, I ask myself, beyond optimizing for efficiency and profit, does this align with our mission of making global trade more accessible and transparent for all businesses, regardless of size? If we build features that only serve large enterprises with complex needs, we might be recreating the same exclusionary system that we're trying to disrupt. When faced with a choice between a revenue generating feature that serves bigger clients versus a capability that democratizes access for smaller businesses who've been shut out of global sourcing, how do I balance growth against the core mission of accessibility? Even if a decision is financially sound, I need confidence that we're building a more fair and reliable global sourcing ecosystem, not just a more efficient version of the same gatekeeping. So, Ricky, how much does approaching decisions through that values alignment lens actually resonate with you?
I think 40.
Okay, 40%.
I have to a total add up to 100, right? So I think that's
You
pretty.
only get 100. That's right. And tell me a little bit about your why there. So,
Yeah.
what
So
did you hear?
I,
Yeah.
I think for long-term decisions as a startup, you have to be value and mission driven because ultimately that is what keeps the company together, right? Because the whole point of a startup is you want to achieve your long-term vision. And for us, like there's no problem with serving big enterprises, but for us, that's not our mission. Our mission is we believe there's a huge gap in the market for small businesses. So that is our core long-term vision. Having said this, the reason why I don't give it 80 or 100 is because we have to be realistic. For a startup to survive, you have to live long enough to achieve your vision. So there are going to be compromises you have to make throughout the journey. But the compromise has to be reasonable. Like you can't say, okay, I'm going to give up my vision and then just work on something unrelated. So I think there are going to be cases where for the financial health of the company, you might make some short-term decisions that allow you to live longer or to sustain your business. But I think the long-term vision needs to be in the big picture all the time. And
Okay.
if there's ever a point where you have to make a cross like a decision where it's very hard, I have to say the answer is nuanced. Like there is no like right or wrong. It depends. It depends on what situation you are in. Depends on your cash flow. It depends on where you are. But I think generally the thing that keeps a team together at a startup, the reason why people join startups is because they're trying to change something. They're trying to do
Yeah.
something that is different than what is being done. So if what you're just trying to do is like everyone else and you're just trying to make money,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not really the goal of a startup, at least.
Yeah, that's really good. Shared vision, shared mission is always going to be something that people, especially in earlier stage companies, are going to stand behind. But I'd argue with large companies that part of the reason why they're seeing all the issues they are with hiring and retention is because of the same problem. So I think this is pretty consistent. All right, here's the next one. That's great. So you're 40% feeler. Here's your next one. It's called the planner. It's a strategic visionary. So this persona focuses on long-term implications and future-proofing decisions, always thinking several moves ahead and considering multiple scenarios. So when making strategic decisions about SourceReady's AI architecture or market expansion, I'm positioning for multiple divergent futures. In one scenario, AI capabilities advance so rapidly that autonomous negotiation and real-time regulatory compliance becomes standard, requiring us to architect for full automation from the start. In another, geopolitical fragmentation intensifies with regional trade blocs and competing regulatory frameworks, where our ability to navigate complexity across jurisdictions becomes the moat. In a third, blockchain and decentralized systems reshape how global trade verification happens, potentially disrupting our entire approach to supplier validation. Each one of these futures requires different technical foundations. The first rewards sophisticated AI development, the second demands deep regulatory integration, and the third requires rethinking our architecture entirely. How do I make platform decisions today that keep options open for scenarios I can't fully predict while ensuring we're not so hedged that we're not optimized for any of them? So, Ricky, how much does that multi scenario, long term thinking drive your strategic decisions?
Yeah, these are good questions. I would say 25.
Okay.
And the reason why I don't put that as a higher score is because as a startup, you don't want to get into decision paralysis. You can always think of 100 different scenarios, but I think the founder needs to have a good gut sense of where the market is. Obviously, you can brainstorm all the different ways that things will happen, but I think you need to, while thinking about the risks, I think you need to think of the most likely scenario and kind of stick with it for at least a certain period of time. And then you may pivot, you may change. Let's say you found out that you were wrong, then you
Mhm.
just quickly change. But I don't ever want to get into a situation where you are diversifying your strategy for the sake of diversifying, because startups are limited by resource. Let's say you try all 4 strategies, but if you only do it to a mediocre level, then
Yeah.
you never are able to fully test out a particular strategy. So I would say, for at least from my opinion, I think that you need to have good intuition on what you feel like is the most likely scenario to pan out. And this might also be aligned with your vision. There might be strategies that make sense logically,
Hmm.
but doesn't align with whatever vision you want to pursue. So then you don't waste time doing that. You don't consider
Yeah.
it. So I think that's my belief.
That's good. All right. So far, you're 40% feeler, 25% planner. You got 35% left for two more. You ready?
Yeah.
The next one is called the counter. It's the challenger of assumptions. So this persona naturally questions conventional wisdom and looks for contrarian opportunities, often finding success by zigging when others zag. So when evaluating the global sourcing industry, I ask myself, what fundamental assumptions are we making about how this must work that might be completely wrong? The industry has operated for decades on the premise that reliable global sourcing requires personal relationships, in
Hmm.
person factory visits, and intermediaries who understand local context. You can't trust a supplier without boots on the ground. But what if that's inertia rather than necessity? What if AI powered verification and transparent data can create more reliable supplier relationships than traditional networks that operate often on opacity or gatekeeping? While established players optimize their existing intermediary models, what if we can build a direct connection platform that's actually more trustworthy because it's based on verifiable data rather than personal networks that inherently exclude newcomers? When deciding whether to reinforce industry norms or fundamentally challenge them, how do I avoid the trap where being contrarian makes potential users question our credibility in such a traditional industry? So, Ricky, how much does that assumption, challenging, contrarian perspective shape your decisions?
I think for almost every startup, you probably are doing something that's slightly different than what everyone else is doing. Otherwise, there's no reason for you to exist. So I think there's a large extent of thinking about what we call unconventional truths. Basically, what is true that most people believe is not. And you, for example, mentioned one. So I think that is definitely something that all startups have to think about. If this is so obvious, then everyone would already be doing it. So you have to think of something that's non-obviously true. So most
Mhm.
people actually believe the contrary, but they're all wrong. So I think that is something that I believe in. However, I would not take it to an extreme, to the extent of you're challenging for the sake of challenging. So there
Mhm.
are certain things, certain norms exist for a reason, because there might be limitations, either from a technology or from humans, that
Mhm.
that might not be realistic to change, at least in a short run. So
Mhm.
while you can be ambitious and say, oh, these people are all stupid, like we should change them, like, people don't change. That is an uncomfortable truth, or at least they don't
Yeah,
change overnight.
they do
So
not.
so I think the while your assumptions might be true, the solution that you build needs to be fitting to the reality of what is true. So I'll give an example. Like, if you think about Teslas, right? I think
Yeah.
it's obvious to everyone that a sustainable future relies on a source of energy that is somewhat infinite, and fossil fuels is not that.
Yeah.
However, what Tesla realized early on was that in order to get people to buy an electric car, you can't just incentivize them with sustainability and eco-friendliness, because most people don't care.
Yeah.
Most people are not that eco-friendly conscious. So you actually have to build a car that's just simply better. Like, even if you take away all the eco-friendly stuff, people still want to get it because it's just a good car. So I think it's the same argument. You can make all these assumptions you want, but in the end, you need to be realistic in terms of, does your solution actually, at the current moment, solve a person's problem better than what they're currently using? And
Yeah.
are you able to validate that quickly? Like, are you able to actually get them to immediately feel the value? So I would say, for me, scoring from 0 to, I would say maybe like 20 would
Okay.
be my gut. So it's like something you have to think about when you first make your overall, like, product strategy. Like, you have to think about, is what we're
Yeah.
like, why doesn't this exist today? But I would not overly optimize for it, for the reason that you have to build something that is going to be able to survive the market, and you can't just think of some
Yeah.
some some assumption that won't come to fruition.
Yeah, I like your Tesla example, and I'll add onto it, which is so it's why when you go to charge, it's not showing you just your charging metric. It'll also show you how much money, the difference between
Yep,
what your gas
exactly.
costs you and your right. It's the same concept. They couldn't just go in and be like, we're going to show you some new metrics. No, I'm going to show you
How much you're saving.
how much you're saving, right? Same concept. So I really, for a lot of reasons, appreciate how he thought about this big jump that needed to happen, this big leap, but the
So,
human
like,
piece of
I'll
it.
give another example. It's kind of like this
Yeah,
blockchain decentralization problem.
yeah,
Blockchain has been a very popular word for many years, but if you think about actual implementations of blockchain in the real world, it's very limited. And the
mhm,
reason why it's so limited is because this belief that things should be become more decentralized. I think many people believe that. But
mhm,
in reality, decentralization comes with a very bad thing, which is inconvenience.
yeah,
The more centralized something is, the easier it is. Like if you think about like the US
that's right.
dollar, it's a very
Yeah,
centralized system, but it's nice. It's nice to have something that is conveniently that everyone trusts, et cetera, et cetera.
that's
Um,
right.
and I think the problem with these assumption and contrary beliefs is that they don't take into account the reality of the world and the time it takes for people to change that reality. I'm not saying
That's
that
right.
blockchain won't be popular
Yeah,
in the future, but I
just
think
takes a
for
while.
people that implement it too early, they fall on the trap of like making too many assumptions early on that can't be
Mhm,
validated. So I think the part of the balance is you have to create short-term value for your users immediately. You can't paint them a story and try to convince them to buy into a longer term vision. You have to create value for them right now. And I think that is something that is
yeah.
quite important.
You're so right, and I live it, right? So CMOL is a startup, and decision intelligence fairly new to the world, just in terms of executing decision intelligence systems that help human beings to make the right decision at the right time about whether or not my business is going to grow. And I know we had an early assumption about everyone needs this, right? Because you could think of a million use cases where people actually need this tool. But the education process that we've had to go through with customers to really get them to accept this different way of thinking about their decision making process has been extensive. So I say that to say 100%. I agree with you, and you're right. And I hope that our listeners are taking this very important moment in, because I almost think it's probably one of the most critical things I've heard someone say in a long time. So if your startup, this immediate value concept is something really, really important, because education is really expensive. It costs a lot of money to educate the market and get people to change their minds, and it takes a while. Awesome. Okay. Here's the last one. It's called the data driver. It's an evidence based decision maker. So, this persona relies heavily on metrics, analytics, and concrete evidence to validate decisions, preferring proof over intuition. So, before committing to product roadmap priorities or strategic pivots, we spoke of those earlier, I ask myself, what does our data actually reveal where the real value is? I want rigorous analysis distinguishing between metrics that demonstrate platform activity like user signups and supplier searches and quote requests, and indicators that predict genuine business impact, successful sourcing outcomes, repeat transactions, time to source improvements, cost savings achieved, supplier relationship quality over time. Here's the paradox: the metrics that show our platform is being used are immediately measurable, but the outcomes that prove we're transforming how businesses source globally, better supplier relationships, avoided quality issues, navigated regulatory complexity, long term supply chain resilience, they often manifest months after the initial connection and are much harder to attribute cleanly to any platform. So, how do I balance data driven conviction about what features to prioritize against the reality that the most meaningful impacts resist quantification until well after we've made the investment decision? So, Ricky, how much does that evidence focused guide how you make your strategic decisions?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I would say there are certain leading indicators that you can use to provide trends. It's not going to provide definitive action, but it's going to provide trends of value creation. So I'll give an example. User activity, retention. Are they saving a supplier after they do a search? A user will not save a supplier unless the supplier matches what they're looking for in their head. So these are all indicators that they could be a good fit, or your platform created some value. But there's also qualitative things you can do. So user interviews are always important. So instead of just looking at hardline data, the best way is to just jump on a call with a user and say, hey, after using our platform, did you find value? Tell me about your experience. And these are all other things that I would say data collection could be used for. There is a quantitative portion that you can use. Oftentimes that quantitative is just an indicator of some form of pattern. And that pattern obviously is correlated with the final result. Not directly causational, but correlated. But if you have enough indicators, and you can and the best way to look at indicators is look at step changes. So let's say you implement a feature and you look at what's the change in retention after I did this implementation. And these are all very key things that can tell you, like, okay, it improved. This improvement is caused by whatever thing you implemented. However, it can't give you a conclusion to say your product is better. It can only give you a conclusion that, okay, the usage is increasing. Why is it increasing? Well, then it takes a more qualitative approach where, you do NPS surveys. So I don't know if you know NPS, like Net Promoter Score.
Sure.
So you can just ask the user, how likely are you to recommend this platform to your friend or to someone else? And then as well as that, the best way people vote for is with their money. If they feel like there is value, people will pay for it. If they don't, they will unsubscribe. So that is also a way you can validate whether you are creating value for the user, not only increasingly using it, are they willing to pay money for it? And then obviously on top of that is also doing user interviews. However, there is a nuance with this. I would say a lot of times gut sense and intuition on what to build cannot be seen from the data itself. And the reason for that is because if you ask a user what they want, they oftentimes only describe problems. You should not ask them to describe solutions. Just like 15 years ago, if you asked someone if they wanted an iPhone, they would say, no, I want a better keyboard. They would not imagine that you can use a thing like that. So I think especially in the supply chain industry, most people are pretty traditional. They would not imagine a solution like this. So you can't take all of what they say at face value. You have to take it with context. And then you have to imagine a better way of doing things and then validate that by getting them to use it. So I would say that's another thing that you have to be careful with just looking at pure data.
I think that's a great piece of advice. So what's your percentage there? What do you take? 15%? Because that's all you got.
Yep, that's all I can
so
do.
You feel good about that, or you want to make it easy?
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I think data is important, but
that's good.
But yeah, I think that's fine.
Good. 40% feeler, 25% planner, 20% counter, 15% data driver. And it's a whole bunch of trick questions because the idea is that in your organization, you'll have balanced decision making. You won't represent all of those personas all the time, but you'll have people on your team that take on different parts.
Yeah.
But so anyway, thank you so much. That was fun. Love to do it. So my very last question for you is really about what piece of advice do you have for any leaders who might be looking to apply AI to complex relationship-driven industries like supply chain and global trade? What would that advice be?
I think the advice would be humans should make the final nuanced decisions. You should think of AI as an enabler, and more importantly, the things that AI are good at are creating candidates for you to choose from. So looking at large volumes of data, choosing the best candidates from that data, and then you as the human making the final decision from that selected pool of candidates. And this is the case with almost every marketplace or sourcing scenario, like even for recruiting, right? Like let's say you're a person, you're trying to hire someone. Now there's probably hundreds of thousands of potential candidates, but you don't have time to interview 100,000 candidates. So you probably have to select the top 20 candidates out of the 100,000. And what AI is good at is helping you from that large pool of potential, select that smaller pool for you as a human to finally vet. So I would say that is something that AI can really help with.
That's great. So, Ricky, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. You're tackling one of those problems that sounds simple, connect buyers with suppliers, but it is incredibly complex when you actually dig in. So where can people learn more about SourceReady and follow your journey?
They can follow our LinkedIn or go to our website, sourceready.com, to sign up for free. So we offer a free trial. So you can try it for free. And if you ever needed to reach out, connect with me. Happy to help out with anything.
That's great. And for our listeners, Thank you so much for tuning in. We'd love if you enjoyed listening for you to rate it, subscribe it, share it on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose. Thank you so much.